Everyone stood frozen in fear as they gazed at Madame Eight Legs, her dominating figure commanding attention. Camus attempted to speak, but Victor quickly placed his hand over her mouth, silencing her. Worriedly, Victor whispered to Camus, reminding her not to make loud noises as Madame Eight Legs had poor sight but sensitive touch and hearing. Victor's thoughts wandered back to an old native's warning he had heard before his regression, about the incidents associated with the La Rouge et La Noire mountain. It was a legend that resembled a horror story, one about the madam with 8 legs who dwelled deep within the forests. The Empire's Monster Dictionary, after several revisions, contained written records of this terrifying creature, known as Madame Eight Legs, ranked as an S-tier risk and capable of causing nationwide destruction in a single day. Suddenly, Madame Eight Legs emitted a piercing scream, accompanied by a stream of greenish liquid that sprayed from her mouth. Some of the corrosive substance landed on tree branches, causing them to visibly melt before everyone's eyes. Victor skillfully dodged the falling poison rain, while Adolf created a protective barrier to shield himself and Camus. Ahun, the barbarian, panicked as some poison landed on his hair, exclaiming in fear. Ayan swiftly cut off his hair to prevent further exposure, leaving Ahun on his knees, panting in terror. In a low voice filled with anger, Ayan whispered to him, berating him for screaming in front of Madame Eight Legs. She then glanced at Madame Eight Legs and warned Ahun that if he weren't the shaman's grandchild, she would have killed him. Ayan turned around and in a low voice gave an order to the barbarians, commanding them to retreat. Adolf, carrying Camus, also issued a hushed command to make a run for it. Madame Eight Legs responded with playful noises, seemingly amused by the chaos unfolding before her. Among the fleeing groups, the Balaks scattered in smaller clusters, while the Baskervilles and Morgs retreated together. There was a slight difference in how both groups retreated, but it helped the Madame decide whom to chase after. As Madame Eight Legs charged toward the Baskerville and Morg groups, Adolf expressed his frustration, questioning why the creature was heading their way. A Morg mage stepped forward confidently and told Adolf to leave the monster to him. He began casting a fire spell and proclaimed that fire attacks would be the bug's weakness. With a surge of power, he unleashed the fiery spell upon Madame Eight Legs, resulting in a colossal explosion that engulfed the area. The mage believed he had succeeded, boasting to Sir Adolf about the effectiveness of his attack. However, before he could say anything further, one of the mages standing beside him was impaled by one of Madame's legs. The mage, covered in his companion's blood, trembled in fear, realizing that the fire spell hadn't done anything to stop the creature. As Adolf, Camus, and Victor continued running, Camus expressed shock and bewilderment at the sight of the monstrous creature. Victor, who had been lost in thought, suddenly realized something. He came to a halt and turned around to face Madame Eight Legs, surprising everyone with his sudden movement. Staffordshire questioned Victor, concerned about his intentions, to which Victor replied that they were all at risk of being annihilated if they didn't act. He proposed that someone needed to tie down the monster's legs. When Staffordshire volunteered, Victor interrupted, questioning him if he really thought he would be able to tie down the monster's legs with his skills. Victor emphasized that they couldn't bring this monster into the territory with them and stated that he was the best person for the task of restraining its legs. Victor placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and turned to Sir Adolf, informing him that there was no time left. With a grave expression, he left the decision in Sir Adolf's hands. Camus looked at Victor with shock and called out to him, but Victor pressed on, urging them to hurry and go. Adolf expressed frustration and made the decision to run away, not allowing Victor's sacrifice to be in vain. Camus, with teary eyes, pleaded for Victor to return, but Adolf instructed her not to move. The situation grew tense as Victor prepared to face Madame Eight Legs alone. His hand was tightly clenched around the hilt of his sword at first, but eventually, he loosened his grip and let out a sigh. He contemplated his situation, realizing that he had no personal interest in the destruction of the Baskerville territory. Furthermore, he believed that the Allied forces would be unable to stop the growing power of Madame Eight Legs. However, Victor saw this as an opportunity for himself. If he could fake his death, he could create distance between himself and Hugo's surveillance. This would allow him to buy some time to master the 10th technique that resided in his mind. Once he became skilled enough to stand against Hugo or perfected his ability to hide and control his power, he planned to return to the clan. A red aura began to glow on Victor's hand, and soon Beelzebub emerged from his hand. Victor realized that if he didn't use everything he had, he would die. With unwavering determination, he made the decision to utilize every resource at his disposal, including a large amount of mana he had received from the River Styx's blessing, and the ethereal aura that was reserved for the high-ranking Baskerville swordsmanship techniques. Moreover, he wielded the formidable demonic sword known as Beelzebub. Covered in a red aura, Victor's eyes glowed with a fierce red light. He resolved to utilize all his power and launch an attack. With swift movements, he darted toward Madame Eight Legs and then leaped high into the air. Victor, hovering in the air, directed his gaze down at Madame Eight Legs. The monstrous creature let out a scream as she locked eyes with Victor. His hand continued to emit a powerful red glow, with the aura intensifying until it reached its limit. With incredible speed, Victor shot toward Madame Eight Legs, utilizing the Baskerville Fifth technique. As he closed in on her, Madame Eight Legs found herself unable to move her legs, which began to press firmly into the ground. At the same time, Victor's attack struck Madame Eight Legs' head, causing it to be forced to the ground. From a distance, a radiant red light became visible, rapidly increasing in size. Adolf ran while holding Camus. The Baskerville triplets ran with teary eyes, and a massive beam of light shot up from the location where Victor and Madame Eight Legs clashed. Camus, watching the scene unfold, was struck with shock. Soon a tear welled up in her eyes. She couldn't contain herself and shouted Victor's name. Only a bright red glow remained in the now silent forest, marking the aftermath of the powerful encounter.